Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to another video for today. So today is definitely a double upload kind of day, and I am extremely excited because this marks the return. Finally, we've been waiting for like 6 months for this, but the return of challenge tournaments. So in this case, we are going to tackle the Demonspawn Fire Knight tournament. So that means that you have to do Fire Knight just like normal, minimize the amount of turns, which is kind of somewhat ignorable, just given the difficulty of the ask, but you can only use champions from the Demonspawn faction. Now, unfortunately, there is no Void Shard here on the right to kind of incentivize pursuing the rewards. However, I do think that 250 Eternal Soul Coins is a pretty decent reward, for at least for those more in the end game. Perhaps in the early game, it's a lot less valuable, but for me, that's a decent chunk of essence, so I will definitely go for that. Now, the other thing to note is always, of course, because this is a tournament, is that you have the option or the opportunity to get Relentless Gear. So if you're able to top out your group, depending on whether or not it's easy or hard, then you can get some 6-star Relentless Gear. I think they, oh, look at that. They also are offering some Primal Quartz. I don't value those too highly. I haven't really done much with Primal Shards, but nonetheless, it's a bonus for doing what you're already going to do if you were trying to win your tournament. So depends on your group. If you have an easy one, then be sure to go for it. And we're going to show you a team that might be able to work for you, and hopefully you can be the topper in your group. So as usual, let's hop over to the dungeon tab and talk about the best stages to farm. First of all, let's get out of the way. Ignore hard mode for this. This is a very specific and niche tournament, and the meta for Fire Knight hard is very specific to a certain caliber of champions or certain types of champions that are probably, in this case, they're not in the Demonspawn, so I wouldn't even consider that whatsoever. You can start to think about stage 24 and 25 if you have relatively well-built champions, as we'll talk about in this video, but it is going to be harder because the turn meter reduction required is halved, and so you're going to have to worry about that, and you may not have all of the options for decrease speed, etc. So stage 20 is definitely the most optimal because you do get the best points per energy spent, and so it is optimal for that for tournaments and for dungeon divers, and there is a dungeon divers going on right now. I think it's 4 days long with a 4450 total, which does mean that it's going to probably cost more energy than the tournament is, so just keep that in mind. But I think after this tournament ends, we're going to head into Dragon, where there's going to be a 3 times on speed. I guess I should mention there is a 3 times on Savage, so you probably want to be farming Fire Knight anyways. But if you can do it with a Demonspawn team, then you can double/triple dip with this, as well as the Titan event going on, which we talked in the previous video. So one thing also to note here, stage 16, if you can't do stage 20, stage 16 is void, so it is much easier. You don't have to worry about any affinities. You still have a chance to get 6-star gear, and it's just, you just have an easier time. So you can use a lot more AoE simple champions to really blast through that one, and it probably is going to be faster. You're not going to get as many points because it's not a higher stage relative to the turn attack, but you might have a lot less turns, so you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons for yourself. So the team that I will be showcasing today is specific to stage 20, and voila, here it is. Now, I did not plan this, but we did end up with an all-epic team. So free to play friendly, ? You be the judge. So this is Fire Knight, so we do have to worry about getting the shield down, keeping it down, staying alive during the waves, because they do hit relatively hard, especially the arrows, especially after the buff, good God. And we also have to keep his turn meter down. So we have a pretty standard comp here. We have Allure, of course. Who else? The queen of single target turn meter manipulation. She is negative affinity, but she still works more often than not to control the turn meter. And also the triple hitter is good for breaking the shield. In position 2, who on earth is that? That is Skimfos the Consumed. He is void epic, but nonetheless still useful in this fight. Why is he here? Because on his A3 here, he can steal 100% of the target's turn meter as long as his attack is critical. And he also brings AoE decrease attack. And he also brings decreased speed on the A1, and then he can also drop turn meter on the second hit of the double hitter. So double hitter A1, decreased attack AoE, which is great for the waves, and then another source of turn meter control. Super good. And you can see here, level 50. And unbooked, in my case. He's unbooked. We'll look through the gear a bit later. We have Gorlos Helma, another epic. He's the only epic who can do decreased defense on an AoE, so he's in here as our primary debuffer. We have Magnar, one of the hardest hitting HP based nukers in the entire game. Definitely the hardest hitting HP based epic in the game, so he's our wave nuker. And then we have another, who is that? This is Dur the Hungerer, the epic Duchess. No, I'm just kidding, that's an exaggeration. But he is an epic reviver. He's in there because Allure is weak affinity, so she typically gets targeted. And if you get too many big hits in a row, she does go down. So we have a reviver in there to pick her back up as needed. He also has a chance to stun on the A1, small chance. I didn't really build him with accuracy, but every once in a while it does land. And then we have a decent heal, 15% 15% of their max HP, so not his max HP, unfortunately. And then a 15% continuous heal. Reflect damage, ignorable, but just healer, reviver, and keeping the team running if people start to drop. Once again, take note that Dur is also 50, level 50. So he is booked though, because I do use him in Faction War specifically, and I just wanted him to revive slightly more often. I think it's like a 6-turn cooldown unbooked. But again, that's not really mandatory if he's just in your squad here to keep them alive. But so we have 2 5-stars and then 3 6-star champions, and that's the team. So let's go ahead and run this so you guys can see this team in action. And surprisingly, this team takes somewhere around just under 3 minutes or so. So it's a pretty relatively fast team considering who's on it. And so you can see here that probably a stronger Magnar would be able to just one-shot the waves, but mine is not strong enough. He is in Savage, so he can definitely do some damage. And wow, that was a big smack. There you go. There's that arrow. And he actually died to reflect damage. So that's fine. People go down. That's why we have Dur the Hungerer in there, so he can pick them right back up and we can get ready for wave 2. So rinse and repeat. We still have the debuffer going in here soon. There we go. Decreased defense. We have Magnar probably ready. Oh, nope. One more turn where he has the smackdown again. I do have Allure in Relentless, which is kind of bad for turn attack because she's taking a bunch of extra turns that are probably unnecessary. But in this case, it's just how she's built, and I only have 1, so making do with what I have. So you can see there that even though Skimfos is unbooked, he still has a 75% chance to place AoE decrease attack. So it does land more often than not, and it is useful to temper the damage, specifically of Errol, who you saw there. Take out some people on wave 1 because it just didn't land, 25% chance to not land. And then on wave 2, it did land, and we were able to just tank the hit a lot more better. So here we go. You can see there with the yoink of Skimfos, that is a little AI preset going on there to make sure he doesn't use that on wave 2, to make sure he has it ready for wave 3. Allure, everything is turned off except for the A1, so she's, even though she can weak hit, more often than not, she's not going to weak hit, but there is still a chance of a triple weak hit, and even if she's in Relentless, in my case, she can still back-to-back triple weak hit, which I've definitely seen. So, and for my safety, or my peace of mind, I wanted to have 2 sources of turn meter control just in case we get bad RNG. So we do have Skimfos being able to yoink a turn meter just like that, and then we also have Allure. So Magnar is our DPS here, of course, and then Gorlos is the debuffer. So we still have decreased defense. We will have decreased attack because Skimfos will place it. So just in case we get, again, the bad RNG, a bunch of resists or whatnot, even if the Fire Knight does get a turn, he's not going to smack us into the ground immediately. And eventually, Skimfos might place decreased speed. He might not. It's a really low chance when it's unbooked on the A1, but it's not really mandatory because once the turn meter gets pretty low on the Fire Knight, as you can see, they just kind of keep it down, especially with the Allure taking extra turns. So pretty solid here. The other thing to note about stage 20 is that the turn meter effects are not halved, so Allure is actually getting 25% per instance of her doing it, and then Skimfos is stealing 100% of the turn meter. You will not get that if you go for stage 21 to 25. There's the triple weak hit we talked about, and so just keep that in mind for when you're picking your stage. So there you go, 248, just under 3 minutes as we talked about. And let's see, good piece, nope, bad piece, but it is Savage, so we're going to keep farming. 100 and something turns is usually where I'm at, and just an under 3 minute run. So all epic team getting it done. So as promised, let's take a look at the gear on these champions, and that is not meant for you to copy these builds by any means. It's just meant to showcase what's going on in the team so you understand how and why it works. So we have Gorlos Helma here in Perception and Resistance. I have him built in a very specific way for Faction Wars because that boss places True Fear, and I don't want him to be feared. I want him to be able to resist that, and so he has relatively high resistance at 332. Still has enough accuracy to land his debuffs, 250, just under 100% crit rate. That's a big rip there. 195 on the crit damage, and then 4k attack. So I did build him to do damage. 211 on the speed, so he's just meant to go faster than my damage dealer in this case, who is Magnar. Next up, I already alluded to it, but we do have Allure in a lovely Relentless set. The extra turns really do help her do her job better. So 34k on the HP, 2.6k on the attack. We're not really building her for damage. 1800 on the defense, relatively low. She is pretty squishy, and I do want that to be the case because she is important on my Dark Fae team, and I need to be able to kill her mirror copy, so I don't want to make her too tanky. Unfortunately, the downside of that is that when you come to the dungeon waves, she can just get slapped over like a wet noodle. So 251 on the speed, just slightly faster than Dark Fae. That's the intent of that. Full crit rate because she does need to crit on the A1 to drop turn meter. 140% crit damage. I went crit damage on the amulet just because, again, I don't need survivability, so might as well get a little bit more damage out of her, although she's not really built for attack. And then 350 accuracy, which is enough for Doom Tower bosses. Next up, we have Magnar here in a Savage set, so built to smack. So 78,000 on the HP. He is HP based. Don't really care about the attack, 2.2k on the defense, 190 on the speed, so relatively slow, but he is built to do damage, and that's really all he needs to do the work. 105 on the crit rate, or full crit rate, 229 on the crit damage, and we don't care about accuracy or resistance. Skimfos, next up. I honestly just rebuilt him today. I had gear on him from a way long time ago when they had some sort of Fire Knight tournament where I needed Demonspawn champions. But I rebuilt him today and I had like 200,000 silver, so I had to make sure I used pieces that were already 16. Thankfully, I was able to do that. But we combined him into a speed and a perception set. He is 5-star once again, and just to show here, he's completely unbooked and he still does the job. He's very squishy because he is attack based and he's level 50, but with 30,000 on the HP, again, don't mind the base stats here, or the stats in this case, because he's not 6-star, so they're just going to be completely neutered. But 30,000 on the HP, 2.2k on the attack, not really built for attack anyways, and 1,700 low on the defense. 232 on the speed though, very fast by design. 109, a little bit over on the crit rate, don't care about crit damage, and then enough accuracy to do the job, 275, which is probably more than we need for even a stage 20 dungeon. Probably a 250, 230 will suffice. And last but not least, we have my Faction Wars Dur the Hungerer. Again, I do use him as my support, healer, and reviver in that Faction Wars. I did build him with a little bit of resistance as well. Resistance set, Immortals for a little bit of healing, and then resilience because these stats kind of worked out, but also just to give him a little bit more tankiness because he is 5-star as well. And booked, I did mention that earlier, but just to say it again, he is fully booked because I wanted him to do what he does better in Faction Wars, to do it more often. So 37k on the HP, again, really low. He is a 5-star champion. Don't care about the attack. 2400 defense is on the higher side because I do want him to be able to take a couple hits. 207 on the speed, somewhat low, but again, he doesn't have a banner at all, so he doesn't get that extra boost of speed that would probably bring him closer to that 230-ish range. And then 344 on the resistance. Again, I don't want him getting stunned or CC'd or feared or whatever in Faction Wars. I want him to be able to pick up everybody else. So I built him close to 350 resistance so that he doesn't get CC'd. So now let's talk about substitutions. Now, in this case, it's almost more like upgrades because I'd say my team is fairly budget or free, at least free to play friendly. I am free to play myself, but nonetheless, it's an all epic team, and that's just who I happen to have and to use. So if we scroll down to the Demonspawn, who can we consider for replacements? Now, for turn meter control, I kind of basically showed you the two champions you're going to want to use. Skimfos can work. Like, I don't like depending on RNG, so I'm always afraid of that 3% resist. But Skimfos, on a 3-turn cooldown when the ability is booked, he can steal turn meter, and it is relatively reliable. But you never know, that one time when he gets resisted, then you don't steal the turn meter, and you can, depending on the survivability of your team, you can wipe. So I prefer to have the redundancy of them both. But you could use either one in isolation, and more often than not, they're going to be able to keep the turn meter down. So Skimfos and Allure. Honorable mention to Countess Lick, so I don't have, but she does have this ability here. It's a 3-time hitter with decreased speed, which you do want. Negative affinity for stage 20, so keep that in mind. But it can also decrease the turn meter of the target by 10% per hit. And then super honorable mention to Diabolist, the rare you always throw away from the campaign, because she does have the mini deacon, or I guess the deacon ability on a 4-turn cooldown here, where it will fill the turn meter of all allies and decrease the turn meter of all enemies by 15%. So that's good. But she also has an AoE here where she can place increased speed, which is pretty nice. I know some people run her in stun sets for Faction War, so if you have her in that build, she can definitely help you out there. A1 sleep, really low chance, don't really care about that. For the debuffers, like I said, Gorlos is basically your only option as far as the episodes are concerned. But if you are lucky enough to have Sissy of Flame Tongue, I believe she does have 100% chance to place weaken and decrease defense if they're under HP burn, which they should be because she places it herself on one of her other abilities. So if you have her, she can work positive or neutral affinity for stage 20, so she can do the same job as the Gorlos there in my team. Now for supports, you guys might be able to make some upgrades relative to my team depending on who you have. So first of all, of course, Prince Kymar, king of the resets. And if you have a stronger Magnar than mine, you could potentially just one-shot wave 1 and then reset and do it again on wave 2 with whoever your debuffer is. So that is an option. Honorable mention to Wither the Crown. She is a great support champion and healer, but I tried her out on my team, and if Allure or anyone else died, then they couldn't be picked back up, so I opted for Endure the Hunger in that case. But if you do have a Duchess Lilitu, of course she can come in that team, and you can be a lot more greedy with the DPS as far as your team goes, because you know Duchess is never going to die, and so she can pick up your team. Also Helicath, honorable mention, because you could just block damage on the waves and not worry about getting hit by anything, so that's another way you can deal with the waves. For the epics, I'd like to mention or call out Achak the Wondering. He does have this ability here that is a freeze / HP burn. It will freeze targets whose attack is higher than their defense, which is generally who you're worried about in the waves. So the Arrows and the all the other rare champions going on there, they have higher attack than their defense, the damage dealing ones in the waves, and so this will freeze them a little bit of CC, 90% chance when booked. So a good champion to use for that purpose. And then another honorable mention here is actually Padma. Not a lot of people know that on the A1, all she has to do is crit, and it's an AoE decrease attack regardless of who she hits. So you can turn off the other two abilities. They're a little bit less useful. You build her with full crit rate, and then you have AoE decrease attack. Pretty nice. Last mention here is a rare champion, actually, Abyssal. He does have an AoE on the A1, so this is like the super budget CC, but I haven't built in a stun set for secret rooms because there are a lot of rare secret rooms. So AoE on the A1 also can place block buffs, so the arrow, for example, can't, or when he tries to steal buffs, he won't get anything, or when the other, like Preserver, I think, tries to buff herself, nothing will happen. So pretty nice there. Baby, increased defense, increased attack on a 4-turn cooldown, so a little bit of beefing up of your team. And then he also has a mini heal, just like Endure the Hunger, 15% of their max HP. Granted, there's no continuous heals in addition, so it is a bit weaker, but nonetheless, a still pretty accessible support champion. And I guess I should reiterate, since it's been a long time since I've made one of these videos, that I typically skip the nuker category because I trust you guys. I have faith that you can figure out who you have in the Demonspawn who can deal damage. In my case, it's Magnar, but you can use Hefrak, Drexthar, Kandrafon, Lord Chazar, whoever, Katraxa, whatever, an A3 Blood Twin. You can use whoever you have. You can figure that out. So we're not going to dive into all the best options for nukers, although I guess I just did anyways. So that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to be spending the next 2-3 days or whatever in Fire Knight running this team. And so I'm hoping to get some good Savage gear. It is a 3x going on, so I really need some good Savage gear. So yeah, let me know what team you guys are going to be running. Are you going to be participating in this tournament at all? Do you feel like it's worth it? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one, because I absolutely love, favorite part of the game is these challenge tournaments and coming up with a strategy to get them done. So thanks for watching and have a good one.